So it's the Open Golf this week, and there are several interesting aspects to this championship that will allow you to trade it very effectively. So what are my top 5 tips for the Open Golf? Number 5. So when you look at a traditional golf tournament, they're typically played on parkland courses, whereas the Open is played on a links course, and that dramatically affects the way that it plays. So when you look at a typical parkland type course that you see at Augusta, beautifully manicured greens, and the rough is basically looks like the fairway that you'd find at any normal golf course, you know, wonderfully manicured, all sorts of beautiful surroundings, and links plays very differently. You tend to find you've got undulating ground, it's uneven, but also because it's near the coast, you tend to get a lot of sea breezes that occur at a links course that you necessarily wouldn't get if you're inland. But also, the way the course plays is significantly different as well. Typically, people will go out towards the sea or maybe inland, and then they will reverse the direction as they play up to the 18th hole. So the way the front nine plays and the back nine plays is significantly different at a links course. But you've also got to contend with this very strange layout of the actual course itself. The structure of the course often feels very different. It's not so well manicured. The rough is thick. You tend to pick up breezes that are different at different times of the day. And it's a very different type of course altogether. Number 4. So if you look back at the Open Championship history, you'll notice that sometimes we do get some unusual, very high-priced winners. But there's a reason for that, and the reason is their age. Now, the interesting thing about driving off the tee is that's when you'll get a lot of distance on your shot, and different players will have different capabilities to be able to strike very long tee shots and very accurate tee shots. But that's not necessarily an advantage on a links course where it's going to play a little bit shorter. Now, if you look at the physiology of players, what you will tend to find is that younger players are able to hit the ball much further. So if you're looking at a course like Erin Hills, the younger players will be able to get a lot of distance on their tee shot. But if you're at a links course, that's not necessarily an advantage. So that does favour players that are a little bit older. Now, the interesting thing about tee shots is that when you look at all of the age and the distance that people can get over tee shots, I did some research on this a few years ago, and I figured out that actually mainly it's a physical thing, the tee shot. And as a consequence, if you look at the age curve of players that are around 25 tend to hit the longest tee shots, and then over time that begins to deteriorate. So basically, the older that you get, the less distance you will get on your tee shot, and therefore it becomes harder to hit it longer and more accurate. So you would tend to think that if you're playing a shorter course, that would tend to favour slightly older players, whereas a bigger, wider, open, longer course would tend to favour younger players. So when you look at links golf and you look at the Open this weekend, it's quite possible you could see an older player coming into the mix. Number 3. So getting an idea of how golf is scored per individual hole can help you trade it more effectively. Imagine you're playing links golf, the fairway is fairly narrow, and you're on a difficult par 4. If you don't hit that fairway, then your chance of getting par and a green in regulation diminishes significantly. So take that into account when you're looking at individual holes. So you do your tee shot and you hit the fairway, and then you've got a lovely approach to the green. Or maybe you don't hit the fairway and you actually end up in the rough. So the way to look at golf, and the way that people play golf, and the way that you would score it and price it would be based upon the number of shots you've got until you can actually sink the hole. That sounds obvious, but if you imagine if you send your tee shot to the left, you may have a different result than the number of shots that you need to get to the hole than if you sent it to the right, or if you sent it right down the middle of the fairway where you're going to get a clean shot and a decent approach shot. Now, the interesting thing to note about links golf is that you really do need to hit the fairway, because if you end up in the rough, it can be a bit of a nightmare. However, this is where age comes into things again. As you get more experience at playing these big major championships at these very prestigious golf courses that are generally set up to be quite difficult, experience teaches you how to get out of those difficult shots. So again, while the younger players may be able to hit that ball really hard, fast, and reasonably accurate, if you've got a narrower fairway on a links course and you end up in the rough, it's the experienced players that tend to be better at getting out of those situations. Number 2. Golf is another sport that is blessed with very detailed statistics on how each player plays, and you can use these statistics to be able to give yourself an advantage at each individual tournament. So visit the PGA Tour website to get hold of some of those statistics. So the interesting thing about golf is there are lots of statistics available, just as there are in tennis, and they're freely available on all the PGA Tour sites, the European and the American Tour. And those will give you a clue as to how each individual player will play. But you also have things like putting stats, scrambling, approach shots, and from different distances as well. So if you combine all of those together, and we look, say, for example, at a par 5, you'll know that Dustin Johnson is going to drive it maybe 20 yards further than somebody that's ranked 25th or so on. And that will allow you to work out roughly what chance they've got of being able to get that sort of distance, and how their approach shot goes, and how many putts it takes them to get that particular ball down. So there are loads of stats available, and you can actually combine all of them together to give you a rough idea of how you think each individual player is likely to play that course. And my top tip for trading the Open Golf is, so when a player hits the green with his approach shot, he needs to get that ball down in the minimum number of putts possible. But just how does distance relate to the chance of sinking that putt? So putting is obviously a really important part of golf, and when you land on the green you're looking to get the ball down in at least 2 putts, and of course professional golfers will want to get it down in less than 2. But what chance do we have of getting it into the hole when we're on the green from different distances? So when you're within 2 feet of the hole, professional golfers have about a 99% chance of sinking this particular putt. So when you're over 2 feet but less than 4, your chances of putting drops a little bit to 87%. So when you're over 4 feet but less than 7 feet away, then the chance drops off quite dramatically. You're suddenly down to about 58% chance of sinking the ball from this distance. Now we reach the critical point. When you're between 7 to 12 feet away from the hole, all of a sudden the chance of a professional golfer getting this in the hole in 1 putt drops to about 1/3. And here is your special Brucey bonus tip. At a major championship like the Open, you have an absolutely massive field. You have 156 players that are all trying to win that particular championship. So rather than picking one player to win or lose, why not use a tool like Dutching to be able to spread your risk and your potential profit across a group of players? It's a much more effective way of trading golf.